Hello everyone. In this video, we focus on the core of academic writing. The core of academic writing is constituted by building an argument. The main building blocks of making an argument are claims and evidence. In this video, we will learn what claim and evidence is and how to identify them in an academic paper. We begin with the basics first. We begin by understanding what exactly are claims and evidence and what work do they do in academic research. The Merriam-Webster dictionary defines a claim as an assertion open to challenge. Similarly, one of the meanings of the verb to claim is to assert in the face of possible contradiction. Two things are crucial here: that a claim is an assertion and that it could be contested, that it might not be the absolute truth. The question then arises as to on what basis is this assertion made and on what basis can it be contested as its definition suggests. Enter the idea of evidence. Merriam-Webster defines evidence as something that furnishes proof. In simplest terms, then, a claim, that is an assertion that something is true, can be made on the basis of proof. If this proof is shown to be invalid or defective, then the claim can be challenged and perhaps another claim can be made in its place. Thus, the validity of a claim hinges on the presence of evidence. The genre of academic writing is driven by these building blocks. When you make an argument based upon the findings of your research, what you are essentially doing is that you are making a larger umbrella claim on the basis of the evidence that you have in the form of your research. We need to, however, be mindful that a claim is not the same as an opinion. An opinion is vaguely stated and is not necessarily backed up by verifiable, credible evidence. However, a claim, on the other hand, is worded carefully and is based upon verifiable, credible evidence. Let's look at an example. Take the statement, "Girls are better students than boys." One can already notice the vagueness of the statement. Are all girl students everywhere at all times better than boy students? In order to prove this statement, what kind of evidence might we need? What age of the students are we talking about? What countries, continents are we talking about? Are we referring to the contemporary time or the last decade or the last century? How is better performance defined? In terms of grades, behavior in the classroom, or attentiveness? Once we think of the evidence needed for a statement like this, it becomes pretty clear that this is a personal opinion, or worse, a bias that cannot be possibly proven through credible, verifiable evidence. However, take this statement: "Girl students have consistently outperformed boy students in the central board examinations in India since 2014. This is a much more specific statement with respect to which students, where and in which time period. It is also giving a very specific criteria of performance, that is, in central board examinations. The evidence for this then can be obtained in the form of consolidated lists of total number of marks obtained by girl and boy students in central board examinations between 2014 and 2021. Thus, in the above example, we see that statement 1 is an opinion at best and a bias or a prejudice at worst. However, the second statement can technically be a valid claim, since there are clear ways to provide verifiable evidence to substantiate this claim. Before we move towards identifying claims and evidence in an academic paper, it is important to understand what constitutes evidence. What kinds of information and material qualifies as evidence in the world of academic research? Simply speaking, the answer to this question lies in the research question asked and the method being used to conduct the research or to collect the data. For instance, if I am interested in finding out whether there is a gender difference in school examination performance in urban India in the last 2 decades, then this research question already decides to an extent where I will look for evidence. I will have to look for gender-wise indices of school examination performances, that is, examination grades or marks, in schools in cities in India between 2000 and 2020. However, if my question also proceeds to ask, what could be the reasons behind differential performances of girl, boys, and trans students in urban Indian central board examinations, the evidence for this research will come from a set of very different kinds of information and material. So, I might have to first study the existing literature on gender differences in school performance across the world and specifically in South Asia or India to understand what earlier research has shown. I might then have to interview school teachers from select schools in urban India in order to understand the instructor's perspective on this matter. I might also have to sit in on several classes in high schools in these select schools and observe how gender differences might play out in the everyday school work, including quizzes, tests, group work. Lastly, I might also interview experts in the fields of education, pedagogy, and policy to get their perspective on this issue. In this case, we see that the evidence that I have collected through my research includes not just quantitative data like lists of gender-wise marks in central board examinations in the last 2 decades, but also qualitative data like secondary literature, interviews, and observations. The evidence in this case is in the form of different kinds of materials and information. Depending upon the disciplinary background, the material and information that qualifies as evidence varies. Some of the kinds of material that qualifies as evidence is large-scale survey data or population surveys, census data, laboratory experiments, policy documents, statistical data with regards to broader trends, interviews, observations, photographs or audio recordings, films and literary texts, media reports, social media content, and secondary literature. Let's now go back to our academic paper in order to see how claim and evidence make their way in academic writing. A quick recap of the paper we are reading before we jump in. As we have seen, the authors of the paper argue that the making of the smart city proposal in Kolkata was not a democratic process because it was not distributive, participatory, and responsive. At a larger level, the authors are arguing that the notion of the smart city itself needs to be questioned because this idea tends to exclude marginalized and the poor and can easily be used to put into place a technocracy, that is, domination by technical experts under the garb of democracy. As evidence, the authors present analysis of policy documents and smart city proposal made for New Town, Kolkata, interviews with experts and middle class and marginalized citizens. Let's see then how this evidence makes its way in the paper and what are the claims that the authors make based upon this evidence. One of the important claims that the authors make right in their abstract is that the smart city proposal was responsive but only to citizens from middle and affluent classes. This is a contestable assertion. How do the authors bring in evidence in order to substantiate this claim? We examine here some relevant parts of one section of the paper to see how evidence is used to substantiate claims. To begin with, the authors tell us again in this section that the National Mission Guidelines do emphasize that the smart city proposal has to evolve from consultations with the citizens. This is the part then on which one can evaluate whether the smart city proposal was responsive. What we see here is one part of this section where the authors are presenting their evidence. They tell us that in one section of the proposal on model neighborhood, the proposal asked 3 anonymous citizens about their needs and challenges of living in the city. The authors describe the profile of these citizens: an expatriate woman, a middle-class man, and a retired middle-class senior citizen. They go on to tell us that the major needs and challenges articulated by these respondents revolved around mobility, access to infrastructure, pollution, and so on. The authors further develop their evidence by pointing out the problems with this sample of 3 citizens, that there is no rationale of how they were selected and how representative they were. How do they use this evidence to challenge the responsiveness of the proposal? Look at how they develop their argument. They tell us that what the proposal did was to merely document citizens' concerns. But citizens did not play any role in proposing solutions or initiatives based upon their experience in this proposal. That was the job of the experts only. To the extent it cannot be said to be then responsive in the broader sense of the term. They end with reiterating how a sample of 3 middle-class citizens cannot be said to be representative of the concerns of all the citizens. In the later part of the section, the authors circle back to the claim that they had made. That is, the proposal was not responsive, or rather it was selectively responsive to voices from the middle class, and that it excluded voices from marginalized sections. Thus, we see how evidence is being deployed in support of the claim that the smart city proposal was selectively responsive to citizens. The evidence included a close reading of certain sections of the proposal in order to understand their implications for the requirement of being responsive. Of course, the section includes many other kinds of evidence to prove the selective responsiveness of the proposal, but we will not be able to cover that in the lesson. We have gotten a basic introduction to claim and evidence in this video. We now understand what material and information qualifies as evidence and how evidence is used to substantiate a claim. Making evidence-based claims an argument is the very core of academic writing and research. Thank you.